very good afternoon to you, and welcome to Xandermonium, the talk show that gets you talking. I'm Xander Gibb, and on today's show, along with my co-host, Tony Losacco, I will be breaking down this week's newsiest items and taking your calls on any subject you please. More to come in a mere moment. Now you can interact with us during the show as per usual in the chat room at the bottom of the show page. Keep scrolling down. Now if it doesn't let you join in the chat, it's because you have to join. You can even do that with Facebook or Twitter. Just quickly click even on one of the links and it will let you join. You can also call us with your comments and interesting stories on 347-884-9061. That's 347-884-9061. You can also tweet us. My Twitter handle is @XanderGibb, XanderGibb, capital X, capital G, and don't forget that little @ symbol. And Tony's Twitter handle is @FullStory2014, FullStory, and the number is 2014. Tweet me if you are too shy, and I will make your point for you. Oh, yes, I will. So in a week where the worm really did turn, I was truly caught off guard this time. Now, the worm in this case was Pope Francis, the supposed forward-thinking pontiff. Now, I am seriously wondering if this forward-thinking was real or was it just a great PR stunt in order to take the spotlight off some of the issues affecting the modern-day Catholic Church. Now, his faux pas in the last week or so have many wondering if his Papa Francis friend-to-all act was just for show. Now, last week, in reference to the Paris terror attacks by Islamic terrorists, you see, yes, I'm not afraid to say it, even though our gracious leader is, he said you cannot insult the faith of others, calling freedom and expression a fundamental human right. Now, the Pope outlined why he believes there are limits to that right. If someone says a curse word against my mother, he can expect a punch, the pontiff joked. Now, whilst his handlers have tried to understate this and have made it clear that his commentary was not to be taken as justification for the Paris terror attacks by Islamic fundamental terrorists, but then why even bother to say it in the first place? It actually spits in the face of everyone who died that day. Now, if speech is indeed free, we cannot simply expect to tell others what they should or shouldn't say, print, believe, etc. Now, his U-turn on support for gay people this week was noticed when he said that gays were trying to redefine marriage. Now, I'm rather disappointed, to say the least, that he portrayed himself as not just a force for change, but a supportive advocate for the LGBTQ community. And when we finally thought there was going to be a modernizing of thinking within the Catholic Church, it was, alas, not going to be. Now, I really do hope that I am wrong, but I think it's clear we were duped by this pontiff. Indeed, we were duped by Pope Francis. So that was Xander's soapbox for this week. If you would like to come and get on your soapbox, you can email me at xander@xandergibb.com. That's xander@xandergibb.com. Oh, yes, indeed, you can. So joining me to break down the hotter topics, the issues that matter, is my co-host for this week, broadcaster, libertarian, and free thinker, Mr. Tony Losacco. Welcome back, Tony. How you doing?
Good, Xander. Thanks for having me again.
It's a pleasure. You're always welcome. So what's the weather like down there in Florida? We've got it's raining so much here, I'm thinking about building an ark. What's it like down where you are?
Oh, it's sunny and nice and wonderful.
Are you serious? I'm going to hang
Yes.
up on you now. So it's sunny and nice and wonderful, and we have rain on the East Coast up here in New York City. I find that very difficult to believe.
It is. It's very nice weather right now. I mean, it's not beautiful, sunny or whatever, but it's probably a good 70 degrees out. It's nice.
Well, I guess Florida is the place to be on this Sunday early evening. Now, I don't know how much of the preamble you heard about me talking about Pope Francis showing his true colors, and he's recently attacked same-sex marriage while addressing a crowd. I was going to say a clown then, but that would be totally wrong. In Manila, saying those who support it are attempting to redefine the very institution of marriage. And he said, despite having recently appeared to be softening stance on the issue of gay and lesbian couples marrying, he said the family is threatened by growing efforts on the part of some to redefine the very institution of marriage. These realities are increasingly under attack from powerful forces which threaten to disfigure God's plan for creation. He said that the Catholic Church must help parents to stand by their gay children, but the same-sex marriage never crossed the minds of bishops when they gathered at the Vatican in October. So what do you make of this kind of turnaround and this kind of change of face of the Pope in the past couple of weeks? Because I know you're a Catholic, so I kind of guess that this has bitten you a little bit too. What do you make of it all?
Well, I have my own theory as to what occurred. Perhaps Pope Benedict got upset, and he went behind Pope Francis, bopped him over the hat with a hatchet or something, and said, "This is my chair, stupid," because it sounds a lot more like what Benedict would have been saying than Francis.
Exactly.
You know, it's like he's been possessed by the spirit of Benedict. I was shocked, honestly. I mean, and I tried to reread it, thinking maybe I misunderstood or something. And, you know, I was just talking to Kiko about it earlier today, and I could understand him wanting to clarify to everyone that he's not for gay marriage, because there was a lot of rumors going around that he was going to support gay marriage and there was going to be this big swing in the cap. So I could understand Pope Francis maybe making a declaration from Rome or a statement saying, by the way, we're not considering this. Our teaching's clear on this. But why he had to make it sound like an abomination, which is essentially what he was making it sound like we were destroying society by redefining marriage, I don't know. I mean, is he running for the Republican nomination in 2016 or something?
Wow. I mean, I have to say, this is the thing that always concerns me when people make these sweeping statements about gay marriage, is that they don't kind of break it down. And really, for me, I think what most people are talking about, like not the Pope, but most people in general are talking about with regards to gay marriage, is the right of two people of the same sex to be able to go into a town hall anywhere in these United States, say the same vows and commentary that any heterosexual couple would make, and walk away with the same rights of a heterosexual couple. But I think what he's actually talking about is with marriage as in holy matrimony, and not marriage as it has come to be in 2015. Would you agree with that?
I would. The problem with the statement is he didn't make a distinction, and I really carefully read it and listened to the coverage, and if the coverage is right, basically he made it sound like that the gay community, by asserting the right to want to marry, is destroying the very fabric of society. And yes, I took offense to that, and I was quite shocked. I mean, there's no other way to put it. I'd like to make apologies, but it was like, wait, what just happened here? You know?
I mean, I hate to kind of think this way, because I've championed this guy from the off, because to me he seemed like a breath of fresh air compared to some of the popes of recent times. But you know, I've had a lot of stake on from commentary I've made about gay marriage, because I don't believe that two people that don't attend church, whether they're the same sex or opposite sex, should really go and marry in the church. And no and no minister of religion should be forced to do that. Now, apparently, I'm anti-gay for saying that, but that's honestly what I believe. I believe that I don't believe that the sanctity of holy matrimony should be open to non-churchgoers. Now, I think if you attend a church and you have a minister that is quite understanding and willing to do that for you, that's totally a different matter. But we cannot force ministers of religion to do these things. What do you think about that, Tony?
Well, I completely agree, and I think there's a big difference, and I'm very happy that the Supreme Court is finally going to settle this once and for all. I mean, thankfully for our nation, the Supreme Court is going to do what it should have done to begin with and settle this issue, and I'm very, very confident. I mean, though I predict it wrong with Obamacare, I'm very confident that the Supreme Court's going to, I mean, it's a no-brainer. They cannot say that it's constitutional to ban gay marriage because they'd be undoing the segregation argument, because people use the same argument to justify segregation, saying it should be the state's right and people should have the right to decide constitutionally to be able to discriminate. And the Supreme Court, back when the Jim Crow laws were challenged, said no, nobody has the right to vote discrimination in. So I don't see how the Supreme Court now could rule any different, you know?
Right. But it is a possibility that they could vote differently. You know, I think the thing is that with a lot of these things is that there are unfortunately there are no guarantees. But constitutionally speaking, they shouldn't do anything. They should actually make it a statute that it's legal. Don't you think?
Well, I do absolutely, and one thing that's missed with the Supreme Court is just because the Supreme Court rules and makes something a law does not mean that they've interpreted the law correctly or that it will remain the law or that it's correct. People miss that with Obamacare. You know, just because the Supreme Court makes a ruling, they once upheld slavery, they once upheld discrimination, and then they reverse themselves. People take it, oh, the Supreme Court ruled it, it must be right. That's not necessarily true. I still, to this day, think Obamacare is completely unconstitutional and a violation of human rights to force people to get health insurance to do with their own body. I mean, that's still my view.
How ridiculous is that? In the United States of America, it is now illegal not to have health insurance. What if you can't afford health insurance? I'm just so disappointed with President Obama right now, and my disappointment grows by the hour. And one of the things I heard this week that really kind of bothered me, I don't know if you heard about this, but he's gone through lots of documentation, lots of governmental documentation, and had the phraseology Islamic terrorists taken out. Now, why the hell would you do that? If we cannot recognize our enemy, how are we supposed to fight them?
Well, I agree with you, Xander, but I did find something very troubling in the regular news, and these were not conspiracy websites or libertarian sites. This was the New York Post and the New Yorker magazine publishing the story. I don't want to criticize President Obama because as far as from what I've read, we have a former president of the United States that should be on trial for treason against our country. Apparently, there was direct evidence to link Saudi Arabia to the 9/11, that they sponsored it, that they provided the logistics and everything, and they censored 28 pages of the 9/11 report, which nobody even knew there was 28 pages more, locked them away in a vault, and that proved that Saudi Arabia had finance and was behind the attack. Now, that's unbelievable to me. I mean, if another nation attacked us or provided the logistics and the support and helped plan 9/11, we should have been at war with them. For a sitting president of the United States to cover that up, that's treasonous.
I think so many things that go on in the corridors of power are absolutely treasonous, and to then go and attack Iraq and Afghanistan in response to 9/11 to me is absolutely ridiculous. Because if Saudi Arabia were behind 9/11, why the helicopter are we attacking Iraq and Afghanistan, you know?
Well, that's what's most troubling to me about it. And like I said, these are regular papers publishing this. This isn't like unconfirmed sources or anything, and we don't know unless they release those 28 pages for sure. But if it is true, I mean, picture President Roosevelt after World War II being part of a cover-up to conceal the fact that the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor and then going on and invading, I don't know, France instead. That's the equivalent we have here. As if Roosevelt just totally blacked out the media that Japan wasn't responsible because, we don't want to go to war with them. That's too hard. Let's pick a different country.
Yeah. To me, it's absolutely ridiculous because obviously, there's obviously the oil issue, and that's probably why they wouldn't have wanted to go to war with Saudi Arabia. But that kind of opens up, the kind of worms about drilling, offshore, off the shore of America and stuff, and also greener power issues, which I just think that are not utilized to their fullest capacity. Why should we have a knife at our throat from anyone, let alone Saudi Arabia?
True, and getting back to Obama, I will say the one criticism I do have is why the hell for Pete's sake, did he not go to France with every other world leader and stand against terrorism? He missed his Kennedy moment. He missed his Reagan moment. He missed the boat.
It's a sad state of affairs when you actually get to the stage with a president that nothing surprises you. I mean, last year, my friend Dr. Gina Loudon, who was going to be on today's show, but there was some scheduling issues. She'll be with us in a few weeks. She wrote an article questioning his sanity, and she got death threats and everything. But now, given his actions over the last 6 months, it's not a surprise that people are questioning the president's sanity, because why would you do these things? America looks stupid and weak and feeble, and that's not good. That leaves us very vulnerable. And the fact that he's just released more Islamic terrorists. You see, I'm not afraid to say it, but the president is. Islamic terrorists more have been released. And let's face it, where do these Islamic terrorists go when they're released? They don't go and get a job at Costco or McDonald's and, or go and work for the United Nations. Terrorists are going to go back and be terrorists again because they've got the fundamental thinking that they want to attack us and kill us. So where are they going to go once they're released? To me, this is idiocy. Isn't it time that this president was kicked out of office? Really?
Well, I mean, I heard somebody on one of the news channels. I can't remember, and I apologize which news channel it was. It was a former CIA guy putting this into perspective. And what he said is this. He basically described us as we have the greatest intelligence failure right now of all time. He stated that what we do since the time of Bush to Obama, and Obama just completely went in that direction. Bush started and then Obama just said, yeah, that's easy, we'll go that way. They have gotten rid of every human intelligence asset. There's no, we know the old-fashioned spies with the cloak and dagger, with the Dick Tracy watches, with the infiltration and the little secret notes and stuff. They don't do that anymore. They consider it too risky. We rely on all this eavesdropping and all this computer stuff. And when we go after the terrorists, instead of sending troops, we drop automated bombs from flying automated machines on people. And what people miss about that is when you're launching a drone strike, there is civilians that are dying. There are women and children and innocent men dying. But they don't want to talk about that. So we're not fighting the good fight. We're not fighting the way it should be fought or to win. And of course, I mean, I have some sympathy. I have a little bit of, I shouldn't say sympathy, I have a little bit of understanding towards what is breeding this. I mean, imagine if some nation started dropping unmanned bombs on us for some reason, and my neighbors were dying along with the bad guys. Even if I knew Johnny down the road was a bad guy, you know? Okay,
right.
but if my
totally
house gets blown up in the process and Johnny's dead, but my children are dead beside Johnny, I'm going to blame the guy that took out Johnny.
Right.
You know,
I mean, I have to say,
thing.
I'm always looking for solutions, and I wonder what is the solution. I know this is not going to be a short-term fix, but I worry how much more damage can be done between now and the next election. I mean, in the time you've known me, when you first met me, I was a Democrat, and I was totally pro-Obama, but I just think for me, I just got to the point where I couldn't excuse his behaviors any longer. And to me, that becomes very frightening when you have put your trust in an administration, fully. And that's indeed what I did. But the concern for me is that how much more damage can he do in the next year,
Well, I'm going to say something that's going to be very controversial probably. And you have to look with an analytical point of view at all sides to this, okay? And I'm going to say something that I believe, I'm not saying it's fact, I'm saying I've come to believe that the United States government does not want to win the war on terror, does not want to keep us safe. In fact, they created the war on terror to replace the Cold War from the 80s. After the 80s, don't forget, we were the victor in the Cold War. America had no enemies. They needed a new enemy. And this phantom of terrorism funds so much of the military-industrial complex in America. Whole industries, whole security firms, whole cybersecurity. You name the area of the economy, and it's poured into homeland security and defense and anti-terrorism. They needed an enemy, and they needed an enemy without a face. And I believe that a lot of this is not meant to be won as in a war. They want these people to continue to attack. They want it. They want to be able to control it and limit it, but they want you and I and the American people and the people worldwide to be afraid to turn to the United States government and, in the meantime, pour billions and billions of dollars towards the war on terror because it funds all of these black projects, all this military spending. We needed a new enemy after we won the Cold War, and they found a new enemy. But they can't win it because if they won it, that's the end of it.
But the concern is, they talk about how badly off the country is financially. But are they surprised when we've been spewing money into two wars that were actually none of our business? I mean, really, none of our business. We had no business being in Iraq or Afghanistan, and still every day American citizens are being killed in these countries. Get them all home. Get them all home. This was never a fight to begin with,
I mean, it's absolute insanity, Xander. If those stories I was telling you about earlier are true, we invaded the wrong darn country. We went to war with the wrong country. If those stories are true, we went to war with the wrong country. How insane is that?
I think that the concern is that the insanity never ends. I mean, how long will we accept a maladministration, which is basically what is going on in this country right now, and it's making us vulnerable? I mean, do we have to all be dead before somebody does anything about it?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the money too, and where the funding comes from. It's all about money in this world, unfortunately. And if you trace the money, because I went online and I did some research, apparently President Bush was highly linked money-wise to the Saudi family with oil investment, okay? But it goes further than that. Bill Clinton, President Clinton's campaign before him, was heavily financed by Saudi Arabian money. His father, the Bush before that, same thing. Mr. President Obama here, our current president, guess who paid for a lot of his Harvard education and sponsored him? A Saudi businessman. Now, I'm not I'm not like saying let's definitely draw a link, but you have to look at that information and take things in perspective. Saudi money financed Bush's father, that Bush, Bill Clinton, and Obama. Of course we're not going to want to go to war with that country. Or of course we're not going to root out Islamic extremism if the source of it is coming from where our money's coming from. We don't want to talk about that.
But I keep coming back to this, but why can we not call a spade a spade? Why can we not call an Islamic terrorist an Islamic terrorist? We've gone too far to worry about offending moderate Muslims, because it's not the moderate Muslims that we have to worry about. I'm sure, Bert, you and I know lots of people who are Muslims who want to go to work, pay their taxes, look after their family, and just live your average normal life. But it's not them that we have to be concerned about. In Nazi Germany, it wasn't the moderate Germans you had to be worried about. It was the Nazis. It was them that you had to be concerned with.
Thank you, Xander. I said that just the other day, and I gave an analogy. I said, could you imagine Franklin Roosevelt as president during World War II saying, oh, well, there are good Nazis. The Nazi Party itself has done a lot of good. They revived Germany's economy. They help people. They got people jobs. They feed people. There are good Nazis, but we're just going to go after the bad Nazis. And then going a step further a few years later and saying, but we don't want to call them Nazis because that will leave the good Nazis with the bad Nazis, so we'll just find another name. We don't want to mention that they're not. I mean, that's the equivalent of what this president's doing. It's crazy. Like you said, call it for what it is. It's Islamic extremism, Muslim extremism, okay?
So I want to ask you a question. Go on.
Yes, go ahead.
I want to ask you a question. Do you feel that there's any direct correlation between the Obama administration, let's face it, President Barack Obama, releasing those terrorists last year in exchange for that deserter Bo Bergdahl or whatever his name was, and the rise in terror attacks? Do you think there's a correlation between the two?
Well, part of me wants to think our government's responsible, and part of me wants to believe and give our benefit the government the benefit of the doubt that they're not just releasing these people, that they're doing what law enforcement does on a lot of bases. Like, for instance, if a cop wants to bring down an organized crime ring, they let the small guy go so he'll run back to the big guys, and then they have the big guys. So part of me wants to believe that we're not hearing the full story from the government, that maybe there's a reason they're releasing these people. Maybe they've got them implanted with some sort of device or something, or they're keeping an eye on them to catch the big guys. So I really would like to give our government the benefit of the doubt and maybe think there's some sanity to it. Maybe that's the reason. If not, then yes. I mean, I don't understand it. I mean, even France, I feel bad for the people of France, and nobody misunderstand me. It was a tragedy. It was a great act of terror. I feel bad for them. But how dare the world, and we as Americans, not talk about 2,000 people that were slaughtered in Africa by Boko Haram?
Exactly.
How dare we? And see, Al Sharpton likes to get on his soapbox about racism, right, and pick out things. If he was really against racism, he'd say this is racist. You didn't care about 2,000 black people getting slaughtered in Africa because they were the wrong color and they didn't have enough money, and you're crying over 13 Frenchmen.
Absolutely, and now he's saying, you see, I just think that this guy opens his eyes and he sees racism. He goes to McDonald's and he sees racism because there's only 3 black or / African American people behind the counter. Now he's saying the Academy Awards are racist, and he's furious after the Oscars revealed that its list was all white nominees for this year's Oscars awards on Thursday. And he said the movie industry is like the Rocky Mountains. The higher you get, the wider it gets, he quipped in a statement released later in the afternoon. An outspoken critic of the lack of diversity in Hollywood, he also announced he was holding an emergency meeting next week to address the issue. He said, I have called an emergency meeting. I can't do it on an Al Sharpton voice. Early in the next week in Hollywood with the task to force discussions on possible action around the Academy Awards. The award ceremony was widely criticized after its nominees for Best Actor, Actress, and Director were all white. In the past 2 decades, this has happened only one other time, according to The Hollywood Reporter. Sharpton praised the Oscars for nominating civil rights film Selma for Best Picture, but said it was ironic because the film is based on Dr. Martin Luther King's marches. Now, what do you make of this? Does this guy just see racism everywhere, or do you think that there is an element of racism in all of this?
Well, I think that, and it goes back to something I've often told the gay community, Xander. Let's stop finding homophobia where there is none, where people just disagree, and there's enough homophobia and there's enough homosexual hate out there to legitimately talk about. But when you start criticizing and attacking and getting on your soapbox about things that aren't there, you turn people against you. And I think that's what Al Sharpton's done. I think he needs to sit down in a basic civics class, and I think Al Sharpton needs to study the words of Martin Luther King Jr. And I think he needs to maybe read those words and ask himself, what does this truly mean? Because what did Martin Luther King say? He lived for a day where people would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by their content of their character. Has he even considered that the most qualified individuals for those awards, and I don't know because I'm not in the Academy, were only white? And if that's the case, is he saying a reverse racism should be the case, that we should deny, say, a white actor or actress the Academy Award to give it to somebody who gave less of a performance merely because they're black? And if that's so, he's a racist and he's a bigot, if that's the case. Because I have a problem with things like that.
What do they call that system in this country? I can't think. What is it called? Positive reinforcement or something? I can't think. There's a terminology for actually putting for making sure you employ X amount of black people. What's it called?
Affirmative action, which is bigoted and racist. When you take an unqualified individual and you put them ahead of a qualified individual just because of their color to prove a point, it is wrong and it is racist and it is bigoted. And that is the truth.
I mean, they do a similar thing in the UK. Now, I have to say, I would definitely never say that racism doesn't exist because we know for a fact it does. You know, I've seen it. I've even been accused of being racist with regards to my commentary over the Ferguson riots. But I'm far from racist. I know racism exists, but I don't think we combat it because by making you see, because for me equality is about everybody being equal. If you're making some people better than others, that's not equality. It kind of tips the equilibrium for me.
It is not equality, and that goes back to what I was saying earlier. When you have a corporate world news media that focuses on 13 lives in France that were killed by terrorism and ignores the slaughter of, I believe it was between 2,000 and 3,000 women and children by a Muslim extremist group, but don't cover the story because they're from the wrong country and poverty and the wrong color, that's racism, and that deserves to be talked about. But Al
Sharpton never mentioned that, did he?
No.
Did you see one thing on Twitter from him about that? It's absolutely disgusting. Or maybe actually only I'm gonna proffer an opinion now. I don't think it's that he cares about black people. He just wants attention. And I think that if he did care about black people, he would care about black people regardless of where they were from, whether they were from Harlem or from Africa. And I don't think he's looking to further racial equality. He's actually looking to further his own interests. And the concern is that he rabble-rouses and he puts more division in the community, which to me is really sad because it starts that when that division starts, it grows and it grows and it grows, and I don't think that he does anything to benefit equality in any way, shape, or form.
Well, but let's not be too hard on the Reverend Al Sharpton, because the President of the United States has just done the very same thing. In the news lately, I'm sure you've seen the stories of President Obama's new proposals. He wants to give everybody free internet and free community college, and those are two of his latest proposals. Okay, now I've had a very hard time explaining to people, because they don't understand, that he's got no intention of doing that. The reason he did that was very political. He has made those proposals. He's baiting the new Republican Congress, because he knows the new Republican Congress knows there's no money to do those things, and they're not going to. So then they're going to say no to his proposal, because they're unrealistic proposals, and then going into the next presidential election, the Democratic Party is going to say, look, we would have given you free education, free internet, look at these evil Republicans. It's a political means. If the president wanted to help people, I don't know how many of my clients don't have enough food to eat with food stamps. He could be proposing an increase in food stamps. He could be proposing things that actually help people that there is the money to do. But he's not. He's just throwing these unrealistic things out there for attention and for political gain, which is the same thing in a sense that Al Sharpton's doing. This is the game they play. They pick issues to get people riled up that aren't really issues at all, and they don't deal with the real issue or the real cause.
You've really hit the nail on the head, and I think he did the same thing with this latest thing on immigration. I mean, he's promised for, even before he was elected to office, that he would do something about immigration. And his latest response to the immigration issue was to say everybody that had been here over 5 years and had children could register and be exempt from being kicked out of the country. So what about the people who had been here less than 5 years and didn't have children? You can't help. You can't make a section of people to help and then not help the rest, because I just think that was another tactic in order to make the Republicans look like bad guys. I mean, I'm kind of in the middle, I think, being a libertarian. I don't know if you would agree with that, but I'm not pro-Republican, I'm not pro-Democrat, but if they throw out policies that I think are ridiculous, I'm prepared to comment, regardless of which camp they come from. But how realistic was that, to say that he was only going to help the people with children? What about the people that have been here for 20 and 30 years and have still not been able to get their citizenship? I mean, how do you feel about that, Tony?
I feel that's exactly what I was saying, Xander. I think that they pick things that are easy to try to sell, that sound good, instead of getting at the core of the problems. And that's just it. I mean, there is a lot with immigration out there of misconception. And there's a lot out there with welfare that's a misconception. I'm going to say something that a lot of people don't know that is a fact. There are more white people on welfare than there are black people. Sorry, America, but it's not the minorities. The majority of people, statistically, and you can validate this just by doing a Google search, are white on welfare. But if you listen to the average person on the street, it's all those minorities. I mean, I've heard it this week from two different people myself. Well, the minorities get everything. That's not the case. Same thing with illegal immigration. Whoa, they're taking our jobs. They're taking our jobs. They're taking your jobs, but they're willing to work for $2 an hour. If you want to work for $2 an hour with them and say they're taking your job, then you have the right to say they're taking my job, but not when you're demanding $15 an hour to cook at McDonald's, and then you have the gall to complain that somebody's coming out.
How ridiculous was that, Tony? How much would you have to charge for a Big Mac to be able to pay your employees $15 an hour? I mean, I'm all for a fair wage and for there being an annual increase, because the cost of living goes up every year. But be damn realistic about it. There are college graduates that can't even earn $15 an hour.
Well, and that's the thing, Xander, and that's why I chose the full story for my Twitter feed and the Facebook feed and everything. You have to look at the full picture. Okay? Now, I'm done making the argument that a $15 an hour minimum wage is going to hurt people like me. But let me bring it to the most basic thing. If you raise minimum wage to $15 an hour, prices are going to go up. Those companies are going to raise all their products, raise their prices, and then the $15 an hour is going to be like having $7 an hour anyway. It's a self-defeating result because the prices of everything are going to go up, so the money's not going to have the buying power. And they don't understand that. They don't think that through. You're not going to help anybody. You're going to create the same problem in the same situation.
And I think the long-term concern is because poverty is very circular. Only people with money are able to kind of get out of it, or those that are lucky enough to get an opportunity. Because I say this a lot on the show, but education is so elitist nowadays, and I think that everybody should have the opportunity for education. Healthcare and education should be two basic staple rights, and unfortunately they're not, So it creates this circular vacuum of poverty, unfortunately.
It does, and people don't want to address the real issues. I mean, one thing I agree with the far left on, and I'm the furthest thing from a far left. I'm usually criticizing the left, the far left, as everybody on this program could probably remember from the last broadcast. But one thing I agree with the far left on is nobody wants to talk about the legality of corporations being persons, corporate personhood. See, if you get rid of that, the law in this country says that a business is treated with the same rights as a human being. And human beings can hide behind that business, do whatever they want, lie, steal, and cheat, and everything. They bankrupt the business or the corporation and then just buy another or rename it or whatever. That's the root of a lot of this abuse of the big corporations. But nobody wants to take on, hey, let's change the law. Let's make it where corporations aren't human beings. Let's hold the people that are behind these companies responsible on an individual basis. Then if they're mistreating their workers or they're defrauding people out of their life savings, we can hold the individuals responsible instead of them getting off scot-free. But our system allows them to hide. It's a basic reform that's needed in American capitalism. But nobody wants to talk about that because there's big money backing the campaign from the corporation.
We keep coming back to this every single point, Tony. It's all about money, and that's the sad thing. Because they're not going to be able to take this money with them, when they've sold that, they've sold their country to the dogs. I mean, they can't take this money with them.
No, and I mean, even with the situation of money, you have to look. Like you stated, you were a libertarian, as I am, as you know. Okay. But let's look. The same people that funded George W. Bush's campaign, the same corporations funded President Obama's campaign. Use your brain. What should that tell you? When the same companies are funding, Obama campaigned against Monsanto, for instance, the genetic seeds and all that. He campaigned against them, and then he appointed those people to his very cabinet and pushed through legislation in favor of non-GMO labeling, because he had the same backing from the same companies that the previous president did. It's a show. It's a farce.
It's a continuum of corruption, Tony, and I think that the sad thing is that because of big government, we don't actually ever get to make a difference with it and change it because we're slaves. We are slaves to that circular logic.
We are slaves, and, I was thinking about it recently. I was studying some history and, watching a movie, and I love browsing the internet and doing research after a movie. And I was looking at the history of serfdom and things. And, we criticize slavery, Xander, and then we talk about indentured servants in the Middle Ages. We don't have a different lifestyle today. Back then, the slave worked and had no rights, but the master provided everything for them, and they worked for their money, and then the master provided everything. Indentured servants in the Middle Ages, they had the money, they had no no rights of their own, but basically they worked for the Lord who protected them and gave them things in response for a lifetime of work. Well, what's the difference between that and our modern system of credit? I don't know about you, but I've got more credit debt than I could pay off in my lifetime of work, okay? And that's the fact. The rich are giving me these things that they have in return for a lifetime of work and service to them. So what's the difference between that and what's the difference?
I honestly can't see a difference, and I think that you are probably there are probably so many people out there that have this situation too, and always will always have to live beyond their means, because it's a societal issue, and I don't think it kind of changes from generation to generation. You know, even probably my parents and my grandparents and your grandparents would have had a similar thing. You know, my grandmother used to say the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and it's absolutely, unfortunately, it's true.
But see, and that's where the illusion and the lie comes from. Things haven't changed, and they don't generally change. I'm going to single out Kiko. I hope he'll forgive me as an example, okay? He works for a major American retailer, unnamed, okay? Now, his paychecks, all of his paychecks go back, with maybe the exception of maybe, I don't know, $100 to $50 a month, go back to purchasing supplies at that same retailer.
Right.
I've often told him, I wish you could get them, instead of paying you money, to just give you a gift card for more value, and we could get more stuff from them. What is the difference between that situation and an indentured servant who worked all their life for the Lord, and the Lord protected them and gave them property? It's no different, except they're giving you a piece of paper, not even anymore. They don't give you the paper anymore. They give you an electronic transaction saying, here, this is money, now come give it back to us. What's the difference?
Exactly. And I really do kind of like, you know, I have the highest praise for people who try and better their situation and try and do things for themselves. But unfortunately, so many try and really don't get there. You know, there are families that are living below the poverty line in this country. There should not be poverty in the United States today. There really shouldn't.
No, there shouldn't be. In fact, the United States worldwide, here's another issue that nobody likes to talk about. We champion human rights all over the world, but we have the highest rate of incarceration in the world practically. What does that say about this country? We have the highest prison population in the world.
I think that the American prison system is a totally different subject, and I think that the rate of recidivism is kind of a clear picture of the things that we've been talking about today. You know, the fact that it's a circular problem, because if you get caught committing a crime and they put you in prison and you come out and you can't get a job because you've got a criminal conviction and no one's prepared to give you a break, what's the first thing that you're going to do? If you need money, you're going to do it dishonestly or illegally, because that's the way that you've known to do it. And I'm not saying that makes it right, but we do create recidivists. We really do. As a society, we create recidivists.
We do, and I can give you a very personal example of this, Xander, okay? Without mentioning the woman's name, one of the people that I work with is a grandma. She's raising her grandchild, okay? About 10 years ago, she had a felony drug conviction, okay? They are about to be homeless. She cannot get a job because, guess what, of that felony conviction. Guess what else she can't get? I've tried to get her into housing, but every apartment complex, everything's gone so computerized nowadays, they do the background check. Guess what shows up? The felony drug conviction.
Criminal record.
So she cannot get a job, and she cannot get a house because of something 10 years in the past, and now a 7-year-old child is suffering because of that, because politicians on TV went with the easiest way out. We're going to be hard on these people. We're going to be hard, without thinking through the full story of the consequences of their actions. And see, it's got to come to a point in our society where people start not relying on the government, not listening to the news media and the storyline, but they start standing up and helping each other and thinking through these things with just common sense and logic. And that's when things will change. When people start getting connected again, communities start coming together, and people start helping each other again instead of just this massive sheepfold we've become.
And the concern is that our children learn what they live, and they see this, and it becomes the norm for them too. So you have to honestly and truthfully take a stand and make a change and make a visible change, because if you don't, I think that it just becomes continually perpetuated. I really do.
In fact, here's another example. We're hearing a lot about education, especially with Jeb Bush running for president since he's announced. They have done I don't know nationally, so I won't speak about what I don't know, but I believe it's a trend nationally towards standardized testing. No child left behind, standardized testing. Let me tell you the effect of this. There are a lot of kids I know in my occupation, they can't pass the tests, okay? They're failing school, or they're not getting the help. And there are teachers now that have stopped teaching in the classroom. Their sole goal is to get the kids to pass the standardized test so they get their brownie points and the school gets an A grade and they look like a good school, and it's all based on testing now on computer models. And if you're good at it, that's great. If not, you're not really getting an education to begin with. But the money behind that is it has created a massive industry with it, creating textbooks and testing, and all these companies have come out. That's the money behind it, because they're making money by reducing our children instead of giving them a real analytical education to test scores. Not that testing's bad, but in this case, in what they're doing, they've dehumanized it, is what they've done, and they're leaving a lot of children behind because of it.
But wait, the ideology was that no child would be left behind. But if they are leaving children behind, why do they not see that it's not working?
Because too many people aren't speaking up. I have seen children, I have clients that can't pass the test, whether they have ADHD or whatever, and what's happening is one of two things. Either the kids are failing or getting left back if the schools are honest. But most of the time what's happening is the school's not being honest. They're pushing the kid ahead anyway, or they're finding ways to kick them out of school. And that's the problem. And see, the testing movement's grown so big, it's grown into such a monster because so many of these companies are making millions of dollars creating the tests, creating the scales for the tests, creating the textbooks, creating the study materials, that it's become an industry. So you're not serving the children anymore. You're serving a created corporate profit of an industry. And that's what's happened, and that's the reality of it, and it's sad. We did that with healthcare, though. Look at what happened with healthcare. More people's lost coverage now.
Go on.
Because they can't. Because they can't afford healthcare. In fact, I'm one of those people. I dropped my insurance because I can't afford the new insurance rate. They should have called it the Unaffordable Healthcare Act. I bet you if they ran a model of how many people were dropping it versus getting it, they'd find more people who are without insurance today.
But you do realize you're breaking the law by doing that. I mean, I just hear the ridiculousness of that now, saying you are breaking the law because you do not have health insurance. It really is like something out of like a sci-fi movie, isn't it? That the government is telling you that you have to have health insurance or you're breaking the law. I mean, what are they going to do? Are they going to fine people? If you've got no money to pay for your health insurance, how are you going to have the money to pay a damn fine? I mean, oh gosh. You know what? Let's colonize Mars so we can start a new population and leave all the idiocy behind.
Well, you know, I can. You know what I'll compare it to? I'll compare it to a prior girlfriend I once had. Okay, I dated this girl for a little while, right? And she was kind of a little wacky and stuff. We met up and, you know, we were almost a good fit. Now, she would always tell me what I shouldn't do, right, and stuff. And it was like, Okay, I could deal with that. You're telling me don't do that, that gets on your nerves, don't do something. Okay, I can deal with that. I know what I'm supposed to not do to make you angry. You know what crossed the line with me? When she had expectations of me to do things that I wasn't even aware of that I should do something, and then we got into arguments about that. I'm like, I'm not a mind reader. How can you fault me for something you feel I should have done? Well, that's what the health insurance law has crossed over into. Instead of crime used to be based on committing an action. You knew you shouldn't do something or there would be a consequence. Now they're saying, well, if you don't do something, you're violating the law. What's next?
I'm still in shock that you had a girlfriend, Tony, but you know. But I totally agree with you, and I think the concern is that a lot of these ill-conceived ideas are just put into action. Because for me, I would far rather there wasn't a healthcare system put into operation by this administration. If it was going to be this bad, it's better not to do it if you do it badly. You know, the same as he's done with the immigration thing. I mean, that wasn't an answer for everybody. That was just another botched attempt. I actually called today on Facebook. I actually called the government in the United States the Obama maladministration, and I think that sums it up precisely. And the concern is that how much more do we let him get away with? How much more do we let him mess up this great country of ours?
But see, now I want to point out something too, especially with the modern-day Republican Conservative Party. They are not really conservatives or Republicans, okay? Ronald Reagan, people forget, he was the champion of amnesty for illegal immigrants. He cut a deal in the 80s to let the people stay in the United States. The understanding Reagan made with Congress was that they were going to secure the borders after that, but they didn't. Newt Gingrich got walloped in the presidential debate, if you recall, for making a courageous stance, and he said, as a conservative, as a human being, I cannot separate a father from their son when they've been in this country for so many years and ship the father back over to another country and punish that child because of it. But he got booed out of the debates practically for saying that. So a lot of these concepts that they're having today are not really legitimate conservative comments. I mean, sometimes I think if Ronald Reagan was alive today, he'd go back and be pulling his hair out saying, I didn't say that. I didn't mean that.
I totally agree, and I think that what people forget is that the system has been so messed up for so long. It's not surprising that we have an immigration issue. And yes, fair enough, secure the borders, but ensure that you treat people fairly. And I'm sick of Republicans saying, well, these people have broken the law. Well, these people have broken the law. Well, I know people in this country that are in the country legally, are very qualified to do jobs, were never able to get jobs because they couldn't get visas. You couldn't get a visa without the job, and you couldn't get a job without a visa, et cetera, et cetera. So the system was rigged against the very people that we should be building our population with. And so don't come and say, oh, it's illegal, it's illegal. That you know, if you want to see illegal, then go to the White House, basically.
It's sad, but if you trace the trends, things start out with good ideas and good concepts. And what happens is they get put in front of Congress and the media and the corporations, and the spin doctors put their spin on it. By the time something gets passed in reform and by the time it becomes a law and gets put into action, it's nothing like the original concept. A perfect example of that is, let's look at gay rights for a moment, okay? Gay rights started out with the Stonewall riots, equal rights, not being able to do what you wanted in your own bedroom without having to get arrested and jailed for it. You know, that's how it started off, okay? But now that movement's warping into saying you're violating my basic human rights if you say what I do, that you disagree with what I do. So how did you go from one end and warp a concept of human rights and human dignity, a legitimate concept, and twist it to becoming the oppressor and say somebody does not have the right to disagree with what you do. Now, I've probably made a lot of enemies by saying that on your show, but
well, you know what? I don't think you can actually be in a position where you're trying to make a difference without making a few enemies. I remember when I got my first death threat from being on this show, and I was a bit scared, and then I thought, well, I guess I'm making a difference, and to me, I would far rather be making a difference. Because it's when you don't hear from anybody that you need to worry, I think, personally. Now, we've come to the end of our time together today, Tony. I want you to utilize the last couple of minutes and tell people about your new pages and how they can find you.
Okay, well, you can always find me on Twitter, which I promise to be more active on, at FullStory2015. But I'm very excited to announce that I finally launched my Facebook page version of it, which is simply The Full Story. If you want to look it up, it's at facebook.com, Truth Matters, The Full Story. But if you just type in The Full Story, you should come to my page, and it's basically going to be talking about religion, society, politics, and basic common sense advice that affects you, me, and everybody. It takes all these issues and it boils them down to the basics and has people think, hey, what's behind this? What's the truth? So you can reach me on the Facebook feed at The Full Story. You can reach me on Twitter at FullStory2014. And I will be launching soon, hopefully, a YouTube channel talking about these very issues.
I just want to know, are you going to change your Twitter to FullStory2015, or are you just going to drop the 2014?
I have thought about it. I'm probably just going to leave it as the 2014 if I don't create a whole new account. I'm between creating a whole new account.
It's so last year, you know that. It's so
yes,
last year.
It is so last year. You can thank whoever has Full Story taken on Twitter for that.
Oh, somebody already has Full Story. Oh, I see.
Yes.
I see. Well, listen, thanks for joining us today, and thanks for co-hosting. I hope you'll come and join us again very soon. We'll tweet out, we'll share your links to your new page later on after the show, so people can come and find out where you are, and we'll put them on the YouTube version of this show as well for today. But for now, thank you so much for joining us, Tony Losacco. Have a fabulous week and give our love to Kiko.
Thank you, Xander. You too.
Thanks a lot, Tony. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was the fabulous Mr. Tony Losacco. Make sure you follow him on social media. We'll share the links later so that you can go check him out. Thanks to everyone who's made today's show possible. Thanks to Tony for co-hosting, and thanks to you for listening and for your continued support. Don't forget to check out episode 10 of my talk show, Xandermonium, on Channel 68 on Optimum and Channel 34 on Verizon, and afterwards on my Xandermonium YouTube channel. It was really great to share with you today. Hoping that if you're in NYC that you have stayed dry and that you will check in again with us again soon here on Xandermonium. Thank you so much, and I love you all. Bye-bye.